What's up, folks? We were able to hand these off, as we described our process in the last video, to some student helpers, and they were able to accomplish the whole task. They got our pieces of solid wood cut to length, screwed together, and nailed the profiles on the sides. And we were able to wrap with ram board, which is just sort of cardboard, large format cardboard used for floor protection. Ram board's just the manufacturer. And coat it and staple that into the edge of the plywood with T50 staples, and then trim it all up so that it's nice and flush on there. And then the last sort of piece was to add detail was this hemisphere, and that was done with pipe insulation, which is really handy stuff on stage. All the different diameters and its lightness and flexibility. We tricked out the newel posts on our stairs last year for Adam's family, and you can do all kinds of stuff like that. So it's pretty common to see that sort of profile in a corbel, and obviously this is the easiest way to go about doing it additively rather than trying to use a shaper or something, unless you're completely set up to build. And if it had this bend solid, you could even put a negative scallop on the outside of each corner and really add a ton of detail like that, but this will be fine for us now. And you could certainly make a profile like this out of a board, a solid piece of wood on the side, and do so with a router and just keep adding to these. And maybe we'll come back and do that next year or the next time we try to use them. But these will do us for this year, and I just have the one more to do here. The foam was added by spraying with Foam Fast 74, which is a 3M spray glue. And we just did a, kind of a wide, it sprays in like a fan, so did a wide stripe on the cardboard, and held this over the garbage can and sprayed the back of the foam. And then we just started in the middle, overly long piece, started in the middle and got that. And then we took a dart out of the back to do the outside corner, and then a dart out of the front to do the inside corner, just so that we weren't piling up the material. And it just kind of did that by eye with a long razor blade. And then when it was hanging over, we were just able to pare off the end nice and smooth. So those are looking sweet, and they will go underneath our window boxes like so. We will need to attach them to something sturdy, and we had some treads left over downstairs from stairs in the past, some 2x12 blocking short pieces, really pretty toward the end of their usability. A lot of them were, in fact, the foot or two off the end of a long stretch that we kept and used as a joist. And a lot of this bigger sized lumber often splits at least once, if not a couple times, for the first couple of inches, and the older it gets, the further and further the split goes. So a lot of these were the split ends on what we bought previously and used the rest of, but they'll work. We got this much out of what was left over to block this out. Now this gives us the ability to attach the corbel anywhere in here without only being able to attach to Luan, which is our what we've got over here. So we're gonna add that to the situation, but we'll be able to sort of dial that in, and we can do that when everything's standing up, and we can hold them up and go out and look at them from a ways away. Normally I was about to say go out in the house and look at them to get the perspective on what the show will be, but really we're going to be closer this year, so we'll just want to stand up and stand and look at it as we're in the correct orientation. And most of my worry is that if we were to move them in too far from this edge, that when we are standing up, and this is the perspective that we're talking about, that we're actually looking on them, when we're standing on the floor, our perspective omits them almost completely. But obviously you can see the nearer we come to the end, the more of it we'll end up seeing, like that. So somewhere in there will be what we want, and I don't want to have to choose that right now, so that's how we're going to figure that out. We were able to cap the end. I made up my mind here on what to do with the top detail. I had all of these big ideas about a big crown mold or a stacked crown mold, and this thing is 14 feet long, and that would mean every piece that I use would have to be scarfed because we haven't got anything that long. And even if we did have 14-foot pieces, I kind of boned myself here. It worked out as a pro in one way, let me get my tape measure, and as a con in the other. So originally when I framed this whole thing, framing to framing, right here, so this has got Luan on it, but the face of this framing to the face of this framing without Luan was the correct size to be a little bit, where's our doorway? Our rolling doorway, I think I said in the video, I made that 1/4 of an inch wider than the rolling door, so that we had a little clearance and it would slide in there, but you'd never notice that it didn't quite touch. And then I realized I want to add Luan because the face of that door, when it sits in here, is back in here. So all of this is going to be seen, and I didn't want that just to be the rough two edges of 2x4 here, because that little round on there and that crack throws a shadow in there, and you know what that is when you look at it. It's two 2x4s, especially if it's all waney like this one is here. Now that's why I turn the square corners of these waney boards out. Turn my light on. Turn them to the outside, because if I follow this with the router and we clad this all in plywood in Luan, you'll never notice this trash in here, which you'd never fix in any other way. So that's our plan, and that's how we've been approaching this whole thing. So anyway, then I had planned all that from the perspective of the framing, and then I come to add Luan. Now if I'm adding a 1/4 inch there and a 1/4 inch there, I'm adding a 1/2 inch, and in the end we get all done, that door won't roll inside of there, and had been in a real jam. Fortunately, the way I spaced these things out was I justified their ends, you know, the window box units, justified their ends to these full 14-foot pieces like the that I went and bought, like I said in the previous video. The 2 or 3 that are in here that are a full 14. But when you go and buy lumber, by a length like that, it's normally a little bit longer. And just to be on the safe side. So if you don't put fresh ends on it and aren't careful, you come to a 14-foot board, you got 14.5 here. So Christ intervened on us, and everything was sent to the outside ends of those 14.5s without really putting a fresh end on there, because I knew I was going to be covering everything with Luan like I already started on the other side. And so it gave me my extra 1/2 inch on this opening. So I'm free to add a 1/4 inch on either side, and I'll still have a little bit of clearance to roll that door in there, and that was really sweet. But our issue became, now I could, you know, I covered this all up, but I wanted to know if I was going to use a crown molding or what I was going to do here, so that when I routed through here on this, turn that light on again, on this piece of Luan that's capping the end to make it nice and clean as you look at it, I wanted to be able to follow it. But everything that you would use, even if it was 14 feet, was going to be a 1/2 inch short, which is what happened here. So I ended up making it some casework, basically looking stuff, and it would be done as a cast concrete, like capstone or there's a word for it, but I can't think of it right now. But it would, in real life, it would appear to be all cast in one, you know, solid masonry material. But you know, what we used was just some of this cheesy MDF chair rail. But that allowed me to put a 45 on it and stop a bit shorter on both ends. Actually, I took a little off so that I had the same 1/2 inch reveal all the way around. And in the end, I think it's the best of both worlds, or all things considered. It was the most efficient use of my time and effort, and that's what we're going to do at the top of this particular store. The other two will be a little similar, I think, but the very last thing I might do is slap a 2x6 on top of it that hangs off a little bit all the way around, and that will be sort of a cap. Maybe not, who knows. But like I said, I was able to then decide on what shape everything was going to be and profile off this Luan and take the window pocket out as well. And so we're driving away at wrapping these all with Luan. You may have noticed we got the awning kind of started too. That was the product of the 5-gallon pail and the jigsaw on some fiberboard, some OSB that we probably wouldn't use anywhere in here other than as a substrate to walk on, like a real nice thick 5/8 this is, or 3/4, excuse me, surface. But this was a strip like that one. Now you're really getting down to an unusable thing, because it doesn't paint out real nice. It's got that texture on there. It's really just a nice cheap subfloor or walk surface if we're going to make levels, and we're not going to really need it like that. Certainly not that one with holes in it. I tried to use that first, but the hole worked out right where I needed the profile to be. So anyway, I found a thin strip that had no holes in it, and we used the 5-gallon pail, and we just traced him one after another, jigsawed it out, cleaned it up a little bit with the flap disc on the grinder so it was smooth, and now I'm able to start Luan on here, you know, flush here and flush on this end, and just go zoop, 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 zoop. And the thing about following it with the router is the router bit is round, but it's a 1/2 inch or so it stops short of the sharp inside corner, and then it starts again, and it stops short again. And I can now manufacture using this as a template, because the router has a bearing on it that follows that, so that sticks through and cuts. Ugh, can't see anything here. Cuts on that little edge, and then the bearing below follows the plywood underneath, and it's set to about 1/4 inch or a little heavy. So that's how we were able to follow that along. But the pieces that come off will be repeatable and have a nice finished inside round and are nice and smooth. So make another one and we'll stick him on there, and that'll be our awning kind of a shape. I had made an error that I'll point out just for posterity, now that I know what I should have done. Where to draw it. I started out and I set all the circles tangent, it's called. I set all my 5-gallon pails out so that they were touching one another, and then I took and cut in here. But really I was looking at awnings later, and most of them, the circle that's involved passes like that, and so that what you cut is actually not as deep and doesn't work out. You know, the circles will be laid out, just the arcs, if they're continued, were to work out like that. And so be aware of the fact that it changes the game, and you could obviously do a variety of things, and how much this, you know, this dimension here, how much that comes and goes does change the overall look as well. So be aware of that. But this is going to work for us for, again, for public school, high school musical. I think it looks good. And we're going to close the rest of this end up. Now, after that, when we get this to a point where we can stand it up, I'm considering what to do with these window openings. I think first we did bulk this up to make it physically larger, but I don't want to see any of these screws and any of this gap or anything. So we want Luan on the face of this. And so I could screw it on like I've done everything else here, but I'm going to experiment with contact cement or spray adhesive or something like that, so to keep it completely clear of fasteners. Actually, I take that back. I may start and use fasteners in the first kind of third here of the width, staying here, because I think then once we're done making the whole thing a nice smooth surface, we'll use more of this stuff. That's why it's laying here, and we'll cut it at 45s, and we'll frame out and go around the edge of each window opening. That'll leave some flatness and these, you know, couple body lines, and we'll do the same thing around this window opening too, and in the end it'll provide all of that, what we are familiar with around windows and doors. And that's to say, like this over here, not everybody knows what this stuff is, but they know there's just a lot going on around the, oh, I should turn my light off. Yeah, there's a lot going on around a window and a door. Why are there all these lines? You've got the outside corner of the trim, the outside corner of the jamb, and the outside corner of the stop. But as you can see, you get highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. And that's common and universal to almost all the kind of openings or very conventional windows and doors. So if you haven't got that going on your set, it just reduces the production value of it, it reduces the overall believability, and it makes it clear that it's been fabricated from scratch and it's not, you know, of good quality. And we want to get away from that. That's why we added the foam to the Corbel. We want all those highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow. The more of that we can get, the better, because it just adds credence to an architectural item. It adds a lot of, you know, cost. All those trims, all that finished work, and this trim lumber and stuff that we're using, we were given by a trim carpenter for free, which was wonderful. But when things are trimmed well, they're normally high quality, and so everything kind of goes hand in hand here. And so because we were able to get that stuff, I'm able to use it here. I know I've been going on and on about having no budget, but that's why we have so much lying around. It was given to us, and I'd be remiss if we didn't use it. And it's going to really elevate the production quality of this piece of set, and we're going to carry that forward into the others. That's something else too. We have to make sure not to just burn through all of it. I've been being really careful here not to just use everything up, pull all the tricks out, being focused on this, and then turn around and have to make 2 more stores and have them unfortunately too similar or run out of any particular material that I wish I had more of. So that's part of this too, is we're kind of throttling what we've got for resources. But and we're still trying to figure out, well, how this is going to stand, because while we have to have rehearsals, we need to set the street side up enough to do rehearsing on it, but we also need to clear it out to rehearse on the stage while it's empty, for scenes that are, like, again, in the ether and won't be using this set. And in most years, if we're moving set at all, it's on wheels, and when it's this finished or a little more so, it's fully mobile. While we will be painting it and finishing it more, it's already up on wheels, and cast and crew and whomever needs to can roll it around in and out of their way. Since we're not using wheels this year because we don't have to, we need to find ways to set this all up and rehearse around it and move it out of the way and rehearse without it back and forth as we get closer to our show date. And we haven't totally solved that yet, because it's going to be too heavy to take out of here for sure on a bar. And while we can hold it up with a bar, something like this is, you know, the weight is stacked on this foot, but the foot is to one side. So when you go up with it, it actually wants to tip forward on and take the bar and the suspension, you know, arrangement upstairs and be leaning out at an angle. It's hard to get it to want to stay upright. So we've got some engineering and some rigging questions to solve coming down the pike here, but overall, like I said, I thought I had gotten badly bitten and had to work backward to take this a lot of the way apart to be able to go back to using our door, but it worked out for the best. It did force my hand on how to trim the top, but I think you can see when we paint that in, it'll be looking pretty good. And if anything, I wish I had a little more height. So we may explore that after the fact. I mean, it'll do for now, and it's the type of thing that I got to call it now and wait till everything's kind of in front of me to a certain degree of finish. And if we still have time, well, then I can go and I can putter around tricking things out even more. There's some stuff that has to be there from the beginning, and there's some stuff that'll be added at the end if we've got the time and the manpower. I've got to focus on things like how to get words on what looks like the windows, which I think is going to be laser cut or Cricut cut paper, and then pull black button thread tightly, 2 or 3 strings tightly across, maybe like a table, stick the letters down to that, turn them over, stick the corresponding, you know, letter to the other side so that you've got 2 paper letters sandwiching the string in the right layout. Then you can take the whole thing out to the set here, and we can get the string attached to the set on both ends and pull it tight, and it should hold the paper letters out in space and on what looks like the surface of the glass window. That's going to be in theory, but we wouldn't want it to lay on its back for too long because it would start sagging. It might be something we come out and add once things are standing up. I don't know. And then we may need to supplement that with string that goes up to keep the weight of it from, you know, hanging it down too low. Lots of questions, lots of problems to be solved. But, you know, you're going to watch it all happen right in front of your eyes if you keep watching. All right, thanks. We'll see you.